I love the Fire Emblem series. It's a mixture of fun and unique gameplay and interesting characters with super entertaining stories. But its 17th installment, released in 2023, might be its worst entry yet. So join me as we take a look at Fire Emblem Engage. Just for those who might not know what Fire Emblem is, which if you've never heard of Fire Emblem,
how dare you!
Fire Emblem is a turn-based tactical strategy RPG, and in Fire Emblem Engage, your story follows Alear, or you if you decide to change their name. So you are just minding your business, taking a 1,000-year-old nap, when suddenly you're awakened because of this other scary dude who's just running amok around Elyos, resurrecting corpses, turning them into corrupted for his army, because he obviously wants to take over and get ultimate power, you know, same old bad guy shit. So this wakes you up, obviously with amnesia.
Where am I?
Only knowing what the game is subtly hinting at you.
Divine Dragon.
The Divine Dragon was awake?
Finally, you, a Divine Dragon yourself. You are a Divine Dragon. The Divine Dragon. Did the Divine Dragon really command me to retreat?
The Divine Dragon, the Divine Dragon.
Are you the Divine Dragon?
The Divine Dragon?
I'm the Divine Dragon.
The Divine Dragon.
And I'm a Divine Dragon, you called it?
So I guess we are the Divine Dragon. So now it's up to you to unite the rival kingdoms, to stop this Sombron guy, to live happily ever after. Oh yeah, and your mama's a dragon, and you forgot she was your mama, and then she gets got, and you start weeping like a little baby even though you technically just met her.
No, please!
There's also the 12 emblem rings that contain the spirit of all the Fire Emblem All-Stars. And both sides obviously are trying to collect them all because having them means great and powerful magic power and whatnot. Story-wise, the game is not the best. I feel like they thought just because they have the old Fire Emblem cast come back for some fanfare that it would be enough. But there's a lot of been there, done that feeling. Sure, they introduce a lot of fun villains, and there are actually moments of tremendous heart and feeling between the villains. Probably some of the best in the series. But the story overall just feels very generic, and it actually takes a minute to get going. They bombard you with a lot of long cutscenes. I mean, so long my Switch screen went to sleep. And the story felt rushed to me, like they didn't really have a clear, fun new idea for the story, so they went with the bread and butter of amnesia, collecting things for power, and big predictable twist at the end. There's just something off to me about this game. I feel like in some elements they moved away from what I classically know as Fire Emblem. I mean, look at this goofy ass intro. I don't know, something about this just doesn't fit to me. I could be totally wrong, but I hear and listen to this and I don't immediately think of Fire Emblem. Visually, from a design standpoint as well, they went over the top with their wardrobe design. It's just like super extra, like this guy is giving me homeless BDSM. And what the hell is this chick wearing? Cinderella's carriage?
Cinderella, night and day it's Cinderella.
They're not bad designs per se. They just don't feel like Fire Emblem to me, especially when you have the Dream Team pop up and stand right next to them, so you can't help but to compare the past designs. Engage just made it look like every other anime RPG MMO out there, and I just don't like it. I like that the villains have a more darker tone to them, and I especially love that the ladies lack clothes, but I wasn't a fan of this modern look it feels like it's trying to go for. But visually, from a graphical standpoint, it does look great, pushing the Switch to its limits. Even some still images look very pretty. There's a nice fluidity to the combat animation. It does feel like they're like actually fighting each other. It doesn't look like, okay, I'm gonna hit you now. Okay, now it's your turn. It actually looks like they're in a fight. But I will admit, I do turn these off after a few chapters just to speed the experience up a bit, because it's not like they're going to show me something I've never seen before. There are a lot of little things within the combat that they changed that I really love, and other things outside of the battle that I'm not a huge fan of. First, in the battle, they got rid of the movement arrow. Not completely, like unless you're stuck in the corner then it pops up for a second, but it's mostly gone. You can freely walk around the unit's moving area, and I kind of like that, because with the arrow I would easily screw up positioning sometimes because you see a giant arrow instead of the character. They also tweaked the holy weapon triangle all Fire Emblem fans know by heart. Come on now, say it with me. Swords beat axes, axes beat lances, and lances beat swords, plus a bunch of other shit. You know, like flying is weak against arrows and that kind of stuff. Now, while this is all still very true, it's just implemented a little bit more loosely. Plus, if you do attack a weaker weapon, sometimes you can cause a break, which enables them not to be able to counterattack. So that just adds another little wrinkle to the gameplay. Just like a few other strategies when it comes to having allies close to each other, you can trigger a chain attack which has allies that are very close getting in on the fun of the other allies' battles by dealing some extra hits. Another tweak are these attack lines. They've done it before, but they really just let you know that someone's in range of an attack. And I really like that. Before, you had to cover the board with the enemy's range and it would just be all purple and ugly. This keeps it super clean and it's very helpful to the point where the line of the color changes depending on how dangerous they are. I also love that they got rid of the weapon count. It was such a pain in the ass sometimes to keep track of that, because I would have an ally equipped with 3 different silver axes because one has 1 left, the other one has 3 left, and the other one has 6 left, because they're all leftovers from other allies. So I love that you only need to purchase 1 per ally forever. Consumables, yeah, that's fine, that makes sense. But weapons? Nah, it just was kind of annoying, and I hope to keep this moving forward. The crystals to turn back time is a huge deal. We first saw this in Fire Emblem Echoes, and it just saves you a ton of time. This does have a set number of uses though, but it's pretty generous. I can see how purists might not like this feature, but it just saves a ton of time, especially if you're playing in classic mode and you accidentally get someone killed. Instead of retrying the whole mission, you just rewind a move. And I don't know if your brain works like this, but I personally can't leave anybody behind. If someone dies, I have to retry it. Unless it's been 1,000 times and I'm just sick of retrying it, then you know what? Ricoskete impache. But again, if you don't like it, don't use it. They do force you to use it if your character dies, but if you're that much of a purist, just reload the mission. There's just so many ways to tweak your experience and have a ton of different playthroughs. My first playthrough I like to do in normal and casual where allies don't die. Then I go in hard and classic with the deaths. But the thing that's kind of bullshit about the hard difficulty is like you start missing hits that have 90% chance to land, which is just super annoying. I'd rather them just tweak the percentage to what it actually is. Hell, if it says 25, say that it's 25. Otherwise, it just feels like the game is screwing me over. Something else that offers different playthroughs, and this goes for all the Fire Emblem games, is the amount of characters that end up joining your team. It's pretty impossible to get the most out of them in a single playthrough. There's just too many of them, and you don't get to choose that many per mission, which is one thing that drives me crazy about the series, because it facilitates you to stop using certain characters that you might have been farming, or you get emotionally attached to them for any reason. Maybe you like how they look or their backstory. Like, say maybe you're developing a young mage and he's level 7, then the next chapter, bam, a level 14 mage enters the chat and he's part of your team now. So now you're like, well, that's going to be it for you, I guess. I know, you don't have to. You have the freedom to do whatever you want, so you don't have to replace them. You can have the new guy hang back, which is an option. Hell, you can change their whole life now if you want by switching their classes. But at least in the first playthrough, I like to play with the cards I'm dealt. If you're an archer, you're going to stay an archer. Them's the rules. I feel the need to make rules for myself because these games are getting too open in that aspect. You can do whatever you want, which for my cranky old man get off my lawn brain means there's just too many damn options. Anyone can be anything. Shit, you don't even have to be a thief to open up chests now. That tripped me out the first time I did it because it doesn't really make no sense. Then on top of that, you add the whole engage rings to the mix like I mentioned before. You can equip the rings to allies and then they start to develop a bond with the character attached to that ring and inherit some of their abilities. Like with Sigurd, gives you the ability to move after attacking, or +4 defense, or extra HP. There's really a ton of stuff, and you can pair anyone to any ring. Again, I have to admit, the too many options thing might be a me thing, if I'm honest, because I have severe case of FOMO. I fear I'm missing out on something, or I fear that I'm doing something wrong. But that's the beauty of the series. There's actually no wrong answers. Plus, like I said, the game really incentivizes multiple playthroughs to check out each character. There was actually a handful of characters I didn't even use for a single battle. And you're recruiting people every other chapter. I also like that they let you know who needs to talk to new recruits in battle. Before, you had to pay attention to the dialogue to try to kind of guess who this person needs to talk to. Maybe they have the same color hair, maybe he says brother, or maybe he's like, oh, my sister. So you have to really pay attention to the dialogue. Now, not so much, because it's not even really said a whole lot in the dialogue. Now a little icon pops up and lets you know who's supposed to talk to who. But also, I didn't find that there was actually many instances where you could recruit people from the battlefield. I feel like more of those interactions were missing because most of the team is just kind of given to you.
Thank you for your help.
Now, for one of the main reasons why I think this entry is the worst Fire Emblem, it's because of all the amount of extra bullshit that simply does not matter. They implemented a hub base kind of like they did in Three Houses, aka Three Casas, and I say kinda because it feels so half-assed and forced compared to Three Casas. The hub world isn't that big compared to Three Casas. In Three Casas, you basically had Hogwarts at your disposal, and every corner just felt so alive with so much going on with activities that made you feel like it was important to it. To an extent. I wasn't a huge fan of the running around and chasing down conversations and side quests. That became old real quick. But over here in the Somniel map, it's just filled with pointless shit you can do. Because to me, the activities are just so mundane. Its nuance wears off pretty quickly. But hey, if you enjoy this kind of stuff, let me know down in the comments. I'm very curious to hear what you think. The whole outfits, for example. I get people love customizing, but the options weren't that interesting enough to me to care. Then you can also fish, but why though? Then there's this goofy ass Hello Kitty wannabe thing you can feed and pet and put shit on. Okay. Of course, you have your different shops and a lot of things to boost team bonding. There's swimming, the stables, there's a garden which leads to conversations between the allies. You can exercise to boost stats for the very next battle as if it was some sort of NBA 2K. There's a flying mini game. There's just so much extra bullshit that didn't do anything for me. I like the well where you can drop weapons and then come back and potentially find new, better items. That was kind of cool. But then you have to go to the ring room to wipe down the rings. If not, the emblems get sad.
You take excellent care of the ring.
My favorite room by far is the battle arena. In past Fire Emblem games, you get experience that you can distribute to team members as you please. Well, here you can pick 3 allies for each time that you visit the base. You pick them to fight another random ally and they gain experience that way. They don't die or get injured, and the experience depends on how well they do. I did enjoy watching these fights go down rather than have me just give them whatever I want. This feels like they earn it a little bit, but if I'm honest, I could see the argument of people thinking this is also pointless. I personally just didn't mind it. You can also face off against emblems to increase the bond between them and earn skills faster. After battles, you will get to explore the area, which this also quickly felt like a giant waste of time. There are dots all over the little map with people you can talk to that really offer absolutely nothing. And the blue ones are people that are considered to be important conversations that really just repeat what you just heard on the cutscene. There's also experience points you can pick up and experience points by talking to people. But if you choose not to and just skip the whole thing, you get the experience points anyway, which thank you developers for that. Because after a few chapters, that's what I was doing. I was dipping the hell out of there. Except for one thing that I was kind of stoked for in the beginning, and this was the adopting animals part. I immediately thought, okay, I'm gonna fill Somniel with a bunch of doggies now. But you can only have a few animals and they stay inside of a pen. And depending on the animal, they do drop different kind of items. But again, this is a totally skippable activity. Even the training and skirmishes that pop up in previous locations, you don't really have to do any of it. Yeah, you get rewarded for it, but you can easily beat the game without having to do any of it. Now, I am being a little dramatic and clickbaity by calling this the worst Fire Emblem. But I'm also not lying to you. I do believe this is the worst one, but I also believe this is a very fun game and entertaining. But if I were to rank them all, this would be the lowest one, making it the worst. But I would still put it probably in a B tier. The rest of the series are just hanging out in the A and S tier, so I am being a little extra. But I believe that the Switch phase of Fire Emblem was an experimental one, and I appreciate it. But could we take the quality of life improvements of the gameplay and leave behind the senseless filler part, please? Like the whole exploration I mentioned, there's just ways to make it more digestible and worth your time. I don't want 1,000 missions that have you running from one end of the map to the other for your hopes that your character bones another character. Yes, I'm looking at you Three Casas. Let's be honest, that game was half a dating sim anyway. And I get it, the relationships have been a giant part of the franchise forever. But the gameplay parts of that, to me, are just not fun. It feels more like a chore. And I know there are people out there that feel differently, and if you're one of them, please let me know how you feel down in the comments. But I personally don't want to go swimming or have tea or cook meals. None of that interests me. But I also don't want that to be taken away from you if you want that stuff. Maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe there's a way that we can both have our cake and eat it too. Maybe having quality time points that we can distribute to characters, and it's the same thing as if you sit down and cook a meal for them. I just get to skip the whole cinematic part, but still get the benefits of doing so. but if you like it, you get to watch it and I can proceed to kick ass. Otherwise, unless you find a more interesting way to do those things, just get rid of the exploration completely. Fire Emblem shouldn't have exploration. If you want to have a hub world, okay, cool, but make it a big one, an interesting one, and make it feel alive. And also get rid of the dumb exploration sections in between battles. That was dumb. Of course, all this is wishful thinking because I am looking forward to what the series has in store for us in the future. I was very excited and pleased how much praise and excitement and talk there was behind Three Casas, making Nintendo realize there's actually a demand for the franchise, especially since there was an entry for the Wii U in its era. I still don't know what the f this is, so I don't count it. But during that era, I did cuddle up nicely next to the 3DS and found a home there. This series is so perfect for handheld because of the pace of the game. You can stop and pick up right where you left off with so much ease because of the turn-based elements to it, making it a perfect Switch game. So use this video, share it to your Fire Emblem fans to let Nintendo know what we want from the franchise moving forward. Hey, if you have suggestions, let me know down in the comments. Even if they ignore us and they do half a dating sim, who are we kidding? We're going to buy it anyway. That's how much we love the series. But I will suggest if they do that they give us a classic Fire Emblem first. They aren't strangers to remaking games, and I've been hearing a lot about Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War remake. This was the 4th installment released only in Japan for the Super Famicom. And I would love to see this entry with the modern gameplay improvements I mentioned. No exploring, no weapon count. Yes, classic weapon triangle. Yes, to rewind crystal. No to rewind crystal. Maybe optional to use the rewind crystal, just a more classic feeling Fire Emblem game before you drop a giant crazy one. But the new crazy one has to be more Three Casas than Engage. With 3 or 4 endings, branching stories, just go crazy with the story. Because if we're honest, Three Casas feels like 3 different Fire Emblem games because of all the routes you can take. But of course, let me know what you think down in the comments because I really just love this series and really want to see much more. So if the classic one could come at a launch title, that would be great. Hell, that's really going to get me to buy a new console on day one. Could you imagine a launch title Fire Emblem would go crazy? Even if you remake Path of Radiance, which might be the best one. Even though looking back, the Wii one, Radiant Dawn, did have a lot of talking. That was also really good, but the talking made me lower the tier a little bit with this retrospectively. I really love the Lagoos and all the other stuff. I really love that guy.
Divine Dragon.